Hello and welcome to Unsportsmanlike Conduct, the show where two British brothers talk all things NFL. I'm your host, Dom Corbs, and I'm joined by my co-host, Nick Corbs, who's sporting, dare I say, quite a slightly decent stash.
A very 1950s fighter pilot of me, but Dom, this can be the last podcast until it's gone, so enjoy it while you have it.
You know what? I really don't hate it. It's kind of come into its own a bit here. I think maybe keep it. Thoughts?
Maybe. Well, I think the missus are different opinions, so we'll have to run it past her first.
The ball and chain getting mentioned on the pod. Anyway, so it's a very special episode, one which we've been looking forward to for quite some time now because it's our first mock draft. It's going to be a top 10 mock draft, which you can see on your screen now. Hopefully, we're trying out some new tech here, so let's hope it all works out okay. Essentially, what's going to happen is we're doing a top 10 mock draft. We're going to alternate the picks. So I'll start with one, which allows my co-host here, who's a Giants fan, to pick for his own team, and we will have 5 picks each and stop at 10. We're going to stop at 10 because the draft order is going to change so much. We haven't quite got to grips with every single one of the prospects yet, and we don't really want to talk about them until we know enough about them to actually give our listeners some real insights and not just reading off some other bloke's list, basically, because we do watch these prospects. We do have access to the all 22, maybe not every single game, but we do have enough where we can make a fairly decent evaluation of these players, I would say. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, Dom, these are our own informed opinions. As you might come to see, they might be controversial, they might differ, but as active listeners of this podcast will know, we don't follow trends, we don't follow the norms. These are our own opinions and our own takes.
Exactly. We're independent here at Unsportsmanlike Conduct. No big draft.
Support small business.
No big draft to lure us. So I'm going to start the draft. Now, I will have the first pick, as I said, which allows you to have the second pick. Now, let's open up this discussion with a pretty interesting topic to kick us off. Travis Hunter, 1 overall. What are your thoughts?
No, absolutely not. And this is giving me my take throughout draft season. I don't understand it. Travis Hunter, I think, is the best football player in this draft, and I think you'd be pretty hard-pressed to find someone who disagrees. He is athletic, great instincts, great IQ, baller, has the media pull, has everything you want in a best prospect. However, he is not the best receiver, and he is not the best corner. And it fundamentally comes down to that, is do you believe he can play both ways? If you believe he can make an impact on both offense and defense, then he's worth the number 1 overall pick. However, I do not. Dom, do you agree?
Yeah, I do agree with you, actually. I do agree with you. I think what I disagree with is which is not what you're saying, but I disagree with the take that I'm seeing a bit on Twitter these days, which is that Travis Hunter's the best player in college football because he does the most cardio. Basically, people being like, oh, he's got the most snaps either side of the ball, so therefore, is he really that good, or is he just like a snap merchant? I disagree with that. I think he is a very good cornerback prospect, and I think he's a good wide receiver prospect. But I agree with you, though, I think I have a better receiver on my board, better pure receiver in Will Johnson, which is what the Jags need here. Corner, sorry, you're right, and Will Johnson from Michigan. But you know what, I think here with the Jags, I think if you were to take Will Johnson first overall, I think what I'm going to understand with the draft, there's more things to consider than just kind of player or value. I think the Jags are a team which seriously need X factor, right? They seriously need an injection of real talent. And while I think that the Michigan cornerback, Will Johnson, is a stronger pure cornerback prospect, I think if you took him first overall, you got to kind of think about the fans. You got to think about how your team's going to feel rolling into the new year. And I think, despite everything, I do think Travis Hunter is a very, very good cornerback prospect. And the Jags need that. So I actually am going to take Travis Hunter here because here's my reasoning. He can play cornerback, which is what the Jags desperately need. And by playing cornerback, which is where I think he projects best at the next level, given his frame and I think he's got great ball skills, which translate brilliant to being a corner. He's got elite athleticism and instincts and closing ability. But by playing corner, that's his best way to actually getting on the field on the offensive side of the ball as well. Because if you play corner, you can come on the field for some receiver snaps. You can't be a receiver and come on the field for some corner snaps. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's hard because I disagree, but I do completely understand where you're coming from because.
I'm gonna go Travis Hunter here. I'm gonna go Travis Hunter at 1.
That's okay. If that happened on draft day, I would not be like, that's the worst pick I've ever seen. Throwing stuff at the TV. But they need receiver depth, right? Outside of Brian Thomas Jr., they don't have a lot going on. Gabe Davis could do a bit here and there, but really, what is he offering you? And they do need a corner. You're right. But the one thing about you was talking about Will Jordan, which I think is important, is cornerbacks.
Johnson.
Will Johnson. Sorry, that's my mistake. Sorry, I corrected you earlier. You corrected me back.
1-for-1.
Is that corner's a very, very hard position to evaluate. It's a very, very
Yeah.
hard position that, unlike something like edge rusher or receiver, which historically translates very well from college to the NFL, corner doesn't always do that. I think about Jeff Okudah, who was an absolute baller, one of the best cornerbacks prospects I've ever evaluated in my time watching the draft properly. And he's just a bloke. I know he got traded this offseason. I'm not even certain if he's on the team.
He's at the Texans.
Is he on the Texans still? Okay, but obviously
we might have cut him. We might have cut him.
Obviously, you got Stingley and you got Gardner who disproved that. But that's why you don't.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, new. Sauce is having a big down year. Like, cornerback is a very volatile position to play. And
also, Dom, a lot of less teams run man. And zone corners are easier to find than just the pure athletic ability of a man-on-man corner.
yeah, most teams play zone most of the time.
Yeah.
Like, I think the NFL average for playing like press man coverage is like 7%, which is seriously low. So, and Travis Hunter, I think, is an elite zone corner. And I think that doesn't have the same, like, wow factor that perhaps like a Patrick Surtain, like more like a Will Johnson does. But I just think that's what the Jags need. But then, you're at 2.
Yes, I'm at 2. And with my Giants, who, unfortunately caught Danny Dimes, with the Edinburgh Mavericks looking for a new quarterback, so maybe he could come to us. But you have to go quarterback here. You saw Tommy Cutlets on the weekend. And also the Giants are actively tanking for a draft pick. The statement of putting out Tommy DeVito and not Drew Lock, we are tanking for a draft pick, which, we'll have a discussion if that's good or not. Maybe we talked about previously, not to talk about for today. The Giants have to draft a quarterback. And I personally don't like this quarterback class very much. And would you like me to run down the quarterback? No, we'll draft more quarterbacks later. So I'll talk about one quarterback now.
Yeah, talk about one now.
And this is very dependent on if we keep our coaching staff or if we draft an offensive-minded head coach. Because my quarterback number 1 is Cam Ward.
Okay, good. We're in agreement.
And so Cam Ward, as Dom somehow predicted at the start of the year as a sleeper top 5 quarterback in the draft, he is really, really good. And I don't think that should go understated. He's got great arm talent, great athleticism. I think he actually reads the defense very well, which was a big why I was quite skeptical of him coming in. Going from D2 to Washington State, he was having very simple offense. And the Miami offense is hardly, pro style, but you do see him make these full field reads. He's not just staring down a receiver and making a play. He really is digesting information. But the reason why the coaching is a big thing for me is because he's a confidence player, Dom. Much like my pro comp for him is Baker Mayfield, which they don't have the same play style. They don't have the same play style, but hear me out, okay? Is because they both play with swagger. Their biggest part of their game is swagger and confidence. When you see him saunter out of bounds after a 20-yard run, when he walks out, that is similar to Baker in my mind. He's someone who has complete and utter confidence on himself. He went from D2 to D1 and then transferred to a bigger D1. He's bet on himself his entire career. His entire college career. He was a no one who made himself something. And this is why I actually am in favor of keeping Dable. Because I think he can be a quarterback whisperer. Or a Joe Brady, that's what, if you have a big offensive-minded head coach who can keep his confidence, who can keep that energy that he plays with, that swagger, which makes him such a good prospect. And it's why I'm not super high on him, because I think that is something that in the NFL can get taken away pretty quick. Look at someone like CJ Stroud even. When he's playing, you see he doesn't have that same swagger about him after a few bad games. And as a rookie quarterback, you're going to have bad games. So Cam Ward is my number 2 overall pick, but I am tentative about it.
So, are you drafting Cam Ward on Aura?
Yeah, as in, you can take the piss out of me as much as you like. But also, I think he is a better prospect out of everyone else. But
you're like one of those boomer GMs that have had lead paint in all their houses.
Cleveland Farrell's such a leader on and off the field. That's why I like him so much. No,
I mean, what I would say though is that I would also take Cam Ward here. He's my 3rd ranked overall player, my number 1 ranked quarterback. I think he is the one which I would feel the only one that I would feel not really confident about, but the most confident about taking the top 10 in this class. He's got big playability. He goes big game hunting. He can make plays with his arms and his legs. He's got a live arm on him. And obviously with that big game hunting play style comes turnovers, he has that almost Josh Allen-esque, able to dig himself out of a hole that he put himself in kind of play style, like against one of the games he played against. He threw like a crossbody pick 6, which put them in a hole, and then he eventually got them back out of it to win the game.
Was it that Duke game? No,
I think it was the Duke game. I think it was the Duke game. I mean, I really like Cam Ward, and you're right. He's got a unique play style. If you watch him, he's got this. I mean, I would compare his play style in terms of on the field to like an Aaron Rodgers. You know how relaxed he is, how he can just like send and then launch it. That's what kind of reminded him of me. I think he's a kind of combination of Aaron Rodgers and Josh Allen for me.
Yeah. Josh Allen would be another one, yeah, but yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Like rookie year,
Yeah.
Josh Allen, not like Josh Allen now. So I've got the Raiders here, and I should have prefaced this at the top of the show. Actually, this is going to be a mostly what we would do mock draft. However, for this third pick, I am going to make this more of a prediction because I seriously think that the Raiders are going to draft Shedeur Sanders. Now, I think that would be absolutely bloody crazy. Okay, let me just get Shedeur up so I can have him.
But you can't even score down far enough.
I know, ranked 21. I mean, no. I seriously think that the Raiders are going to draft Shedeur Sanders. They're probably not going to be in the QB1 bid at the moment, right? The Giants are ahead of them. There's teams like the Titans maybe nipping at their heels. They might finish in or around there, but if they don't get to draft the first quarterback, and actually, to be honest, I think they could take Shedeur Sanders one as their first overall pick, regardless of the other quarterbacks on the board. He could be their QB1. I just see this is something that the Raiders could do, I think. We're hearing all the rumors at the moment about Shedeur going with Dion and then being like a package deal. We've also heard Dion saying that there's certain teams that he wouldn't let Shedeur go to. And I think the Raiders kind of fit the bill for both of those. I think Dion would be willing to go to the Raiders, as would Shedeur. They don't have like a history of not being able to develop quarterbacks, like let's say the Browns, for example, or the Jags maybe if that was a potential team need. I just think though with Shedeur, he's not a quarterback that I like at all, anywhere near the top 10. I would not take Shedeur Sanders in the top 10 at all at this point. I think his strengths are that he's a good anticipation passer. He's a pure pocket passer. He can make some big throws from the pocket. He's sixth in big time throw rate sixth in big time throws in college football at 22. So he can make plays with his arm, but I think he is a seriously underwhelming athlete. And if you're just a pocket passer with essentially a not a live arm or great accuracy like CJ Stroud, then I think you're really limited in the NFL. Like, I think that if you can't offer some elite physical trait in some sense, then it's going to be an uphill battle for you in the NFL. And I think Shedeur, unfortunately for me, ticks none of those elite trait boxes. Doesn't have a live arm, isn't like elite accuracy, obviously not a great athlete either. So for me, he still holds on to the ball for too long, which is a massive issue. He's inviting loads of pressure, which is a big problem. And I just think, for me, he's a weaker arm Geno Smith is what I would compare him to. So this is not a pick that I would make whatsoever, but I can really see the Raiders doing it. They need a quarterback. They can't not draft one now. They kicked the can down the road last year when they took Brock Bowers and didn't make a move for one of the 5 quarterbacks that went in the first round last year. Maybe, was it 6 or 5? So I think this is going to have to be Shedeur Sanders here, but it would be, if this happened on draft day, I would throw something at the television.
Dom, and I do tend to agree. I'm slightly higher on him than you, but your evaluation is not incorrect at all. But I think you make a very good point with Travis Hunter at 1, which is media pressure. The Raiders, whether in Oakland or in LA or in Vegas, have not had a lot to be excited about in a long time. No one cares about the Vegas Raiders, and Shedeur Sanders would make people care about them. And it is a tone-setting pick rather than a good pick. And I think a lot of GMs do that. And also, just a side note, we won't talk about in this episode, we'll talk about later. Dion is not an NFL head coach. We both agree on that. If I saw that with the Cowboys, even linked to the Giants, if that happens, I'm switching teams, whatever. No, that does not work, but we'll talk about that for another episode. So now I've got the Patriots.
I think there's only one pick you've got to make it.
And I'm so happy I get to make it. Tetairoa McMillan.
Yeah.
Oh, he's the best player in this draft. And I've said this preseason, I say this now. What he can do, he can come into the NFL and, in my opinion, be one of the best receivers in the NFL. No one can do what he does. He is Megatron 2.0, but with cooler tattoos. He is so good, Dom. He dominates games.
That's a bit of a grim pro comp there.
How is that a grim pro comp? 6'5", will probably run a 4.4-4.3, can absolutely physically dominate defenders at the catch point, and he is good route running and gets separation. No one else in this draft can do what he does. I've never evaluated a prospect that can do what he does. And the big thing for me with Teto McMillan, as there'll be a theme when we get to draft later, is sometimes watching film can be a bit of a slog. You might agree, Dom. This is my passion. I love American football, but watching Will Campbell film is pretty slow. Teto McMillan film makes me forget I'm analysing a player. I'm just watching the plays, superstar play, game-breaking play, and I even almost forget to evaluate him because I'm just so blown away by his just pure physical ability. And that is a physical ability that I believe will translate because we've seen big body receivers not translate well. JJ Arcega-Whiteside comes to mind. Can you think of another one, Dom, that went early?
Who was the one that got drafted by the Cardinals? Arizona. Did he go to Arizona State?
Oh, yeah, and N'Keal Harry could be another example.
N'Keal Harry, yeah.
But I completely believe that he's the best player in this draft, and I think he's a better prospect than Marvin Harrison. I think he's a better prospect than Malik Neighbors, and I think he's the best prospect in this draft.
Whoa, that is crazy. So I really like Teto McMillan. He's my number one ranked receiver as well, and he's my second overall ranked player in this draft class. But no, if Teto McMillan was in last year's draft class, he'd be behind Marvin Harrison Jr., he'd be behind Malik Neighbors, he'd even be behind Roma Dunze for me. I think overall the class is a lot weaker this year. You'll hear that, and oftentimes I kind of be like, how truth can't really be. No, trust me, it's a pretty weak class this year, considering that Teto McMillan is going to be a top 5 pick, and I think he deserves to be. But yeah, if he was in my last year's class, I think he would have been wide receiver 5, and I would have also probably taken Brock Bowers ahead of him as well. So, de facto wide receiver 6.
Have you watched the tape, Dom?
I've watched the tape, Nu. I've watched the tape. I mean, let me talk about Teto McMillan quickly. So he had a really, really good 2023 campaign, and then had obviously week 1 against New Mexico State where he had like 300 yards and like I think
it was an FBS record or something ridiculous. Yeah,
it was crazy. I think he's a traditional X wide receiver, obviously at the height. I think he's closer to 6'4". I don't think he's going to come in at 6'5". I think he's 6'4", 215 pounds. 77% of his snaps are out wide, so he's like a proper X receiver, right? Which is what NFL teams cover in the first round, particularly with these high draft picks. He only has, though. I mean, I'll actually stay on the strength for a second. He's got great mobility for his size. He plays like a smaller receiver in the best way possible. He's a real yards after the catch threat. He's not a Marvin Harrison type player. He's more like a Roma Dunze in the sense that you can give this guy screens. He's a threat at all 3 levels of the field. And you want to get the ball in his hands. I personally would give him the CeeDee Lamb treatment. I would put him in the slot quite a bit more than he currently is, and just have that guy running in breaking routes and just giving him yards after the catch opportunity. Like if he was in a Shanahan style offense, loads of in breakers, this guy would absolutely cook. But ultimately, though, I don't think he actually plays like a 6'4", 6'5" wide receiver. He's only got a 50% contested catch rate, which is not very good for a receiver of his size and his stature. And he's not that physical either. I see him getting bullied sometimes in press coverage by 5'11" DBs. And he's not boxing players out. Like, I don't want him to be a pure jump ball specialist because that doesn't really translate to the NFL. But I want him to be better at that aspect of his game. And I think his route running is really inconsistent sometimes. He's jogging routes. In at least one game which I watched, it resulted in an interception. He didn't run his fade properly, stopped in the middle of his fade. Nerf Fafita, his quarterback, still threw it, and the safety picked it off because no one was there to contest it at the catch point. So I agree with this pick, Nu. I really like Teto McMillan to the Patriots to give Drake May finally a wide receiver 1, and his play style will really complement Drake May's and vice versa. So I think it's a great pick and a great fit. But I don't think that he's a Megatron level receiver. And I definitely don't think he's a Megatron level receiver. And I also don't think he'd be in the top conversation of last year's draft.
Well, Dom, to be fair, I think in terms of last year's draft, I think the other receivers had more traditional things that I think skill sets that I think receivers look for, whether that be quickness, route running, especially referring to Neighbors and Marvin Harrison. But I just think here's things that you cannot teach. And Dom, you're right. Yeah, and I don't. The reason why I say he's got good route running, because I don't believe he's like a DK Metcalf who can only run a slant hitch.
Yeah.
I believe he can be an out-and-out one receiver, and he does get bullied a little bit at times. But I think you can teach that. You can teach a 6'5" guy to get off the line, and we won't talk more about him because we will talk about more down the line. But I'm a big fan.
Yeah, I'm a big fan too. I mean, I would just expect more kind of like CeeDee Lamb style of play, not necessarily his eliteness, but that kind of style of play more so than like a Mike Evans kind of style of play, if that makes sense, kind of tempering those expectations a little bit. And I really actually would compare him to Nico Collins, another, big-bodied yards after the catch threat rather than like a big-bodied jump contested catch player. But that brings me to the 5th overall pick with the Panthers. And I think it's a pretty easy pick here. I'm going to go for Mason Graham, the interior defensive lineman from Michigan. He is actually my 6th overall player in this draft. But what I think he brings to the Panthers is tone setting, which that defense desperately, desperately needs. They have Derek Brown already, obviously, who's been injured this season, so he's not there. With both of those two guys on the field, the interior of that defensive line and really that whole defense is going to be absolutely rock solid. Mason Graham is a human pit bull new. 6'3", 320 pounds, and he is rocked up. So that's 24th percentile height. So he's quite short for a defensive tackle. But he's 84th percentile in weight. So he's literally like, you know that pig in Family Guy? Oink.
Muscle pig.
Like he's basically like that. He's explosive. He's got like hammers for fists. He can just push back offensive linemen, reset the line of scrimmage. He's strong. He can withstand double teams. Not quite the level of like a Byron Murphy, but he can definitely hold his own against them and anchor really well in the run game. And he's got really active hands. He's not just like a gap shooter at all. And he's quick. Like for a man his size, he's got some wiggle to him. The weakness is, though, he's not really a finisher. He kind of gets these pressures but isn't able to convert them to sacks. Often he's kind of like stumbling, so he'll split a double team, but then will fall over. And he's not quite a refined pass rusher yet. I mean, I saw this man, bearing in mind that he weighs 320 pounds, I saw this man trying to do a spin move. Like, he's trying to be like an Aaron Donald-esque pass rusher, using his hands and swim moves, rip moves, push pulls. He's not quite that level of player at all, I would say. He's a power guy. Like, he needs to play like Byron Murphy plays. Do you know what I mean? Like, just use that explosiveness, use that strength, and just run through these offensive linemen. He tries to be like too cute with it, I think. But I think for the Panthers, though, he'll kind of kickstart that defensive rebuild.
Yeah, Dom, but my question to you is, he's a player who only had 5.5 sacks in his first years at Michigan. And the Panthers really lack talent. Similar to the Jags, they need playmakers. And how valuable is a good run-stuffing interior defensive lineman?
Well, I don't think he doesn't just stop the run. And I think his sack total is something that would change if he was able to be a better finisher, because he gets the pressures, he does all the dirty work really well, and he allows the other players to kind of fulfill the rest of the sacks, if that makes sense. Like, he's the one that's responsible for it. He makes the quarterback roll out into the edge rushers who sack him. They don't get credited for that, but that's kind of, he's a force multiplier is how I would kind of describe him along the defensive line, is what I would say. And for me, I'm not loving the edge rushers in this class. And I'm sure we'll talk about that in a second when they inevitably have to come off the board. But I think Mason Graham, for me, is one of the few, like, is he blue chip? I don't know if I'd quite go that far for Mason Graham, but I think he's definitely one of the more talented players in this draft. And for the Panthers, they just desperately need talent.
No, Dom, I do agree, but I think there is something to be said for that, because, for example, let's take Jalen Carter or Dexter Lawrence, who are some of the better, not similar players, but play similar positions. Obviously not like the nose tackle, he's more of a forefront defensive interior, but they took a couple of years to get to the way they are. Jalen Carter's obviously a good rookie. Dexter Lawrence is now one of the best defensive players. I'm not saying they're the same type, but they do play similar roles in a sense. And getting that size on you, and getting that weight, and getting used to how strong NFL linemen are does take time. And it's a question of, does this Panthers front office have the time to let a defensive player get better? Allow them to get.
Yeah, I think they definitely do. They definitely do. I mean, it's a new regime. It started this year, and Mason Graham is powerful. Like, you don't have to teach him power. If I've learned anything from Byron Young, it's that, like, power is the most effective move in the NFL for defensive linemen. Mason Graham is 320 pounds. Now, that guy's rocked up. Like, I get what you're saying. Like, that could an edge be more valuable? Do they need talent right now? Both things are probably true, but this is the point. The Panthers are in a full-on defensive rebuild. You could add, TJ Watt to that edge group, and it's not going to make the defense that much better because everything else is so terrible. So give me Mason Graham. I'm sticking with it. You're at pick 6 now. Who are you taking for the Titans?
The Titans. So, Dom, this might be short-sighted, but I saw some Will Levis sparks against the Texans on Sunday.
So I would not take a quarterback.
I'm going to pump the brakes, because also I'm not we'll probably bring up Jalen Milroe later. I'm not massively into him. I think he's a good player, but he has some terrible games that really do scare me in the evaluation.
Yeah.
For the Titans, I think you've got to go best player available. And you've got two options here. I think you've got Luther Burden, and I think you've got Ashton Genty.
You think Luther Burden's the best player available?
Well, I think it's a very hard evaluation. But I'm going to go with Luther Burden, Dom.
Okay, I think Ashton Genty would have been. I like the Luther Burden pick there.
Yeah, because I think 6 is a bit ridiculous. Actually, but I think Ashton Genty would have been another pick that I would have been happy with. So for me, Luther Burden is one of the hardest prospects to evaluate in this draft class. Did you agree, Dom?
Yeah, I agree. He's not had the year that we all hoped he would have, which always makes it hard.
No, like he was a more or less wide receiver one through and through before the season started. And Missouri had a bit of a down year. Bad quarterback players plagued much of the Missouri season. And you would expect him to dominate more than he has. But I still think that the talent was there from last year's evaluation. I think he can play in the.
Yeah, I agree.
I think he can play in the slots. Sorry. Sorry, Stanley came in.
You think you can play in the slot?
Yeah, so Dom, I think Luther Burden can play in the slot, and I think he's very good at the screenplay. He's very good with his ball in his hands and the short passing game that I think the NFL really is thriving on these days. You see it with the Shanahan system. You see it in the West Coast offense. And Luther Burden, I believe, can still be at that level. I think the reason why he's had a down year is due to bad quarterback play. Now, will that change with Will Levis? Different question. But I think that he has the traits and the skills that you're looking for to be a top 10 pick.
I like your shout to not take a quarterback for the Titans here. I think you're right. Will Levis has shown signs of life. I think I wouldn't take a quarterback at this point. The only quarterback I would take I'd take instead of Will Levis at this point is Cam Ward. None of the other quarterbacks I think have shown me enough where I would feel confident in it being an upgrade over Will Levis. I think you saw some of the throws that Will Levis made against the Texans. Like, he's still got that cannon, and that plays in the NFL. And I think he had, that meme start to the season where he had his head in his hands and was diving and pitching the ball forward and was literally just like, in kamikaze mode. But I like the Luther Burden pick here. I think a lot of people think it's a bit too early, but I have him as my 9th overall player in this class. And I think because of the weakness of it, I think if you like a guy, you got to take him, to be honest. And I think it kind of really does skew with the positional value and things like that. Like, I think you've got a wide receiver there that might have a pretty similar style to like a Calvin Ridley. I think he plays Luther Burden a bit like a Malik Neighbors as that kind of, modern receiver. You can line up in the slot. He's had snaps in the backfield. He's a yards after the catch threat. He's very dynamic with the ball in his hands. 1st and 10, throw him a screen. He'll make it a first down. I think he's not quite that level of Malik Neighbors, though. It's just like a similar style of play. So it's not, don't think you're getting one of those elite playmakers. I think Luther Burden's this wide receiver 2 in this class pretty comfortably. But again, like I said, that would probably be like wide receiver 7 in last year's draft. Yeah. Like, you might be getting like a kind of maybe a little bit better Lad McConkey is what I would almost say.
He's a better prospect than Lad McConkey, but Dom, I think you also got to think about team fit here. And with the Titans, when we were playing that game against the Texans, when we were watching it, when they scored, the first answer was who? Chigga Okonkwo got a 70-yard touchdown. There's Westbrook Akine, Calvin Ridley. They're not bad players, but these are just blokes, and they really need to bolster that offense. And Luther Burden, you're right. I don't think he's a good player as Malik Neighbors. I think he's better than Lad McConkey. I think that's a bit of a harsh take from you, Dom. But
Lad McConkey for me was a top 25 player.
Okay, fine. Okay, well, compared to where I guess the NFL media.
Yeah. But then before I move on to my pick, Luther Burden has over 80%, 84% of his snaps are lined up in the slot. Is an NFL team going to spend a top 10 pick on a slot receiver?
Well, Dom, like you pointed out with Ted McMillan, CeeDee Lamb plays takes his snaps out the slot. Malik Neighbors takes his snaps out the slot. It's the modern NFL offense, and I do agree. I think it is a bit of a drawback. It's a negative. I do, call me old school. I do like the fundamental X receiver out wide, on an island, just make a play. But that's not really where the NFL is going. And I think at the NFL, it's all about where the wind blows. And Luther Burden is that trend. Okay. And I think he is still a very, very good player.
All right. So that leads us to the 7th overall pick, which is me with the New York Jets. This is a really interesting pick. And honestly, I've not actually given it that much thought. I've been looking at it as you've been talking, and it is hard. They need a quarterback, they need a tight end, they need defensive interior, and they need a cornerback. Goodness gracious me. Well, obviously not taking a tight end at 7 overall in this draft class. There's no Brock Bowers or anything like that.
I'm high on the tight end class, though.
Oh, God, this is a rough. I think at this point, you've got to think the Jets would kind of like trade back maybe. They don't need an offensive tackle. I would take someone like Will Campbell here or Calvin Banks, but I don't think they need that. I'm going to take Jalen Milroe here now, I think, for the Jets.
Okay.
Which I'm not... Oh, God, I'm really not sold on. I'm not going to lie. I've clicked it, and I don't know how sold I am on it. I think that if they don't need a tackle, and they can't trade back, and they don't need edge rushers because they're getting Jermaine Johnson back because he ruptured his Achilles. So they still have a lot of talent along that defensive line, particularly at edge rusher. There isn't another interior defensive lineman that I would take here. Probably, you know what? Maybe Will Johnson was a slightly better pick there if they need cornerback. But I really think that with Rodgers likely going right at the end of this season, a lot of rumors are at the moment that they're not going to bring Rodgers back and that Rodgers doesn't want to play for them anyway.
Team, yeah.
What are they going to do at quarterback? I don't think Jalen Milroe is going to start for them right away. He should not. It would be a disaster. He projects like an Anthony Richardson style of player to me in the sense that like this guy needs time to develop. And unlike Richardson, I wouldn't put him in to get that time. But I think Jalen Milroe offers you elite upside. I think he's got a really low floor because of his kind of like the mental processing of the game. I think he doesn't recognize the blitz very well. But his physical traits, his arm and his legs are elite. Like I would say Richardson, Cam Newton level for Milroe. Like he can turn, if you're playing man coverage on third down and the defense isn't looking at Milroe, he's gone. And I've seen him make the most mental runs from a quarterback I've ever seen. Again, up there with the likes of Lamar Jackson and Anthony Richardson. So yeah, it might be a bit high, might be a bit rich, but the Jets need a quarterback if Rodgers is going. And for me, I would take a swing on Milroe, I think.
I just don't think it's a good scheme fit because I don't have an issue with the positional value here, Dom. You know, I don't. With quarterbacks are going to go high, and there's lots of quarterback needy teams, and he will end up going top 10. I think we can both agree that for almost a certainty. But with the Jets, I think they just need talent, and I think they've got so much money in these big players. Sauce Gardner's going to come up for a new contract. They've got Devontae Adams out wide. I just think he's going to take too long to get to the place he needs to be. And that's why I'm not too sure about the scheme. I think Will Johnson would have been a better fit. Make a lockdown defense. Justin Fields is a free agent. Russell Wilson's a free agent. Get in a more tenable quarterback and then push on from there.
Oh yeah, I would go free agent call. I'm not, like I said, Milroe's not my starting quarterback. Yeah. I would go with whoever I could, like, you know, Ryan Tannehill, get him off the sofa, like literally anyone. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. The Jets are in their win now window, drafting a quarterback at 7, which is going to take 1-2 years minimum to develop into a potential starting quarterback, is a bold swing. But look, I think the Jets are way closer. They're closer to the first overall pick than they are to the Super Bowl at the moment. So, you know, it speaks for itself. But you're on the clock for the Browns, Nick.
This is really hard, Dom. This is a really hard pick if you're the Browns. Because
I don't think so. I think this is really easy.
Because all the good quarterbacks are off the board.
Yeah, you're screwed. I think quarterback is off the board.
Yes, and Carson Beck's fallen off, Nussmeier, no chance. So I think you've got to go best player available. And a big thing in the draft is make your strength stronger. And that's why I'm going to go for Abdul Carter, the edge out of Penn State.
Are you joking? No, are you sure you want to make that pick, by the way? Are you sure you don't want to take like an offensive tackle?
I think Will Campbell would also be a very good pick. But
are you locking in Abdul Carter?
I'm locking Abdul Carter.
Oh my God, that's crazy. That's crazy. To pass on a tackle there, I think that's nuts.
So Dom, let me just talk you through Abdul Carter for a second, okay, and why I chose him.
All right.
So Abdul Carter is my 3rd ranked player in this draft.
Really?
I'm really high on him. Maybe it's because I'm a Penn State fan and I'm a bit biased, go Nittany Lions, but I'm a big Abdul Carter.
Since when are you a Penn State fan?
I've always been a Penn State fan. How have you not known this?
Right.
Dom, he has a 16.3% pressure rate, which at college is very high. And I think that cannot be understated enough. With the quick passing games, rollouts, the easy reads that quarterbacks have in college, having that higher pressure rate is really impressive. And pressure translates from college to the NFL. D-line is one of the best positions where if you're good at a D-lineman in college, you're almost certain to be great in the NFL. Obviously, there's examples of that where it has gone wrong. It's always a dart throw, but it's a pretty high percentage throw for D-lineman, more than any other position. And pairing the best edge rush in this draft with Myles Garrett on the end gives you the best pass rush, more or less, in the NFL.
Oh, I don't know about that, but I hear what you're saying. To be fair, I hear what you're saying. I think that the edge opposite Myles Garrett this year has been lacking.
Yes, and also Dom. So take the Giants for example. We took Illuminor in free agency, who has been okay. And I feel like offensive line, unless you've got something like the Lions, where it's negatively marked as a positional group, you only notice if it's bad, and you can fill that spot in free agency much better than you can fill an elite edge rusher. And that's why I think Abdul Carter has to go here, because I don't see where else he's going to go. Maybe to the Bengals at 10, but if he's on the board, I think you have to take him.
Look, he's got physical traits for days. He's a high ceiling pass rusher. I think he's still very raw, and I think he's got a real concerning lack of play strength, which really worries me. Like, I think you see it in Will Anderson, and I think he was a supremely better prospect than Abdul Carter. So for me, he's my 15th. He's my 10th ranked player, to be fair. So it's not miles off. But I think with the tackles on the board, that's mental. But it makes it my job very easy with the Saints because I will be taking Will Campbell. I know he's a tackle, and I think he is a tackle at the next level. But he can easily kick into guard for a few years and then go out to tackle when their tackles eventually, bite the dust with whatever cap hell they're in. Who knows? You take a cheap player at a value position like tackle, basically. You got him on the cheap, which the Saints desperately need. And really, the Saints have got to hit the rebuild button here. And drafting a tackle like Will Campbell, not an elite one, not the level of like Tristan Wirfs or Andrew Thomas or Penei Sewell, but definitely that next tier. And so I feel very good about Will Campbell going at 9. But then I will say the final pick, but actually I'll just do the Cowboys quickly. But you do the Bengals.
Yeah, so Don, can I just quickly challenge you on that pick? Because I'm a bit confused by it. Because you have Talisi Fuaga and Ryan Ramczyk. Why do you need a tackle?
Like I said, he'll kick into guard, and you wait till Ryan Ramczyk's no spring chicken, and he'll just replace him when he's done. I think like you say, like look at the Eagles. They draft offensive linemen in the draft every year. They keep them on ice basically, and then they unleash them when they're ready. And who doesn't need tackles? Like you say, the offensive line's marked negatively. Will Campbell will be a great guard. Do you draft a guard at 9? Might be a bit high, but look, again, not this class is not that deep. I like that pick. Who are you taking for the 10 then for the Bengals now?
Okay, for the Bengals, I'm taking Ashton Genty.
No, I was going to take him for the Cowboys. Okay.
Okay. So, Dom, running back doesn't matter. It's obviously a peddled motif, whatever you want to call it, theme, I don't know, talking point, agenda, as Dan would probably call it. But he is phenomenal. Dom, we talked about him in our Heisman episode. What he does is worth a top 10 pick.
Yeah.
He is my pick for the Heisman. He excels on a group of 5 team. That's obviously a good team, but he plays well against better opponents. He leads all NCAA in 70-yard rushes, 60-yard rushes, 50-yard rushes, and 40-yard rushes. And that's what the running back position should do. You see it with Saquon this past weekend. It's all about explosive plays. It's not about the 5 yards of carry. It's about the 70-yard touchdown. And that's what Ashton Genty brings to a team. And it's something that the Bengals desperately need. They might be the best offense in the NFL with Ashton Genty. You have Joe Burrow, you have Jamar Chase, and Ashton Genty. That is a Super Bowl contender with a new coach. Let's just
I mean, as a point of principle, I actually do like Ashton Genty within the top 10. I've kind of come round. End wokeness. I've come round to my
game's gone
on the running backs don't matter trend, because I think that the market has reset itself, kind of balanced itself out. Like look at Saquon, look at Derrick Henry. I think we're at a point now where the run game has kind of balanced itself back out again because of NFL defense's reaction to the pass game, right? Boxes are getting lighter. There's less players in them. Suddenly these running backs can actually make plays again based on their own merit rather than just can it be blocked properly. So I agree with you, New. I think Ashton Genty in the top 10, despite it being pretty crazy for a running back to go top 10 these days. I think if Bijan Robinson did it, Ashton Genty is probably better than he is, I think. And to go at 10 is fine. The only issue I have, though, is that the Bengals literally are losing games because they have no defense. Specifically, no defensive line. So I think to pass on like a Nick Skelton or like a Jalen Walker, some of those more kind of high ceiling defensive linemen, they're not going to be the answer right away, but I think that might come back to bite the Bengals
best player available,
with their Super Bowl hopes.
Best player available, and that's what he is.
All right. So then to recap, because I was going to take if Ashton Genty didn't go there, I was going to take it for the Lions, because I think that is the Cowboys, because I think that is the clear number one fit for him. So to recap, I took Travis Hunter with the first overall pick to the Jags. You took Cam Ward at 2 to the Giants. I took Shedeur Sanders at 3 to the Raiders. Not what I would do, what I think is going to happen. You took Tetairoa McMillan, the wide receiver from Arizona, at 4 to the Patriots. I took Mason Graham, the defensive interior lineman from Michigan, to the Panthers at 5. You then took the wide receiver Luther Burden from Missouri to the Titans at 6. I took a swing on Jalen Milroe to the Jets at 7. Pretty bold, I know. You took Abdul Carter at 8 to the Browns. Not sure about that one, but we move. Will Campbell at 9 to the Saints, which I really, really like. And then finally, you took Ashton Genty to the Bengals with the 10th overall pick. So let us know what you think about those top 10 players in the comments down below. A pretty rogue top 10.
I like it, Dom. I like it.
I like it too, but I think we'll look back on this come, April, come March,
it'll age
and we'll be like,
terribly.
oh my God.
Yeah.
There's always late rises. There's always, people like with the combine and pro days and stuff like that, people can kind of come out of nowhere, basically. But yeah, it's definitely a weaker class, and I think this top 10 really does show that, just giving it a quick look over. But like I said, let us know what you think in the comments. We're going to be doing way more draft content as the draft begins to ramp up, and as we get to know these players better, we'll start doing full-on mock drafts. But I hope you've enjoyed a more in-depth top 10, kind of getting to know some of these players. But I've been your host, Dom Corbs. That's been my co-host, Nick Corbs. We've been on Sportsmanlike Conduct. We'll see you on the next one.
See ya.